our next speaker is Gabby at Gabalexa, and Gabby will be sharing on purity culture. Gabby comes from a religious background, and will be sharing on the impact that purity culture has had on her polyamorous journey. I grew up Catholic, so I would love to hear more. And I'm going to unmute you now and spotlight you, and then I will disappear.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that this event has been so wonderful. No matter how many times, and I work at a dating app, so I often hear people's like non-monogamous story, but no matter how many times I hear it, hearing other people's experiences and being in community like this is just like always so healing and affirming. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy that we could come together for Palestine, Free Palestine. Not only because like publicly supporting a cause is important to me, but because of the money we were able to raise like on my own. Like I'm like raising eSIMs, do this, and like there's just like no better way to do activism than when you come together with other people. And so that just like always warms my heart. So just really honored to be here. I'm talking about polyamory and purity culture, and I was raised very religious. I'm here in the United States, but I'm also in Brooklyn, which nobody ever thinks of when they're talking about purity culture. Everyone's like, and I understand it, right? Because a lot of the people who are funding the like purity movement in the United States, which is, I'm speaking specifically to the United States, I know that the purity movement has caught in like other places, right? But I'm here in the United States, so speaking from my own context, like purity culture just swept the United States in the 90s. And it wasn't just like me and my religious experience, which I felt that way until I looked more into it. It was also that there were organizations like spending money funding abstinence only sex education in our schools. And it was like a disproportionate amount for sure in the South of abstinence only sex education versus what I was getting. But I was still getting pretty much abstinence only sex education. And polyamory is so much like in addition to my consent skills, right? I've learned so much more about boundary setting, about being rooted in my own person, like now that I have started to practice non-monogamy and be around other non-monogamous people, and especially in my work as a sex educator, a consent educator, a polyamory educator. But now that I'm like coming into those like ideals, I'm recognizing that so much of purity culture was like rooted in like distancing me from my own ideals, distancing me from those boundary setting skills, because it wanted me to believe that there was a right way to practice relationships, an exclusive way to practice relationships. And I think, you know, as a bisexual, right, I also kind of like undermine my own bisexual identity because so much of purity culture is rooted in like you have to end up with a man. So I kind of was like, oh, like I'm attracted to women and non-binary folks, but that's maybe like a phase that I'm going through, right? I contributed to my own erasure because of the narratives that I'd heard from other people. And so like coming into polyamory was like honestly a great tool, a great resource to help me in unpacking all of those things. But it also like really required me to look inside, like get internal and be like, okay, am I actually like looking at my own ideals, my own values, my own desires? Am I prioritizing those? Am I centering those and encouraging others to center those, right? A huge facet of purity culture was the purity balls, which I was a debutante. Again, no one thinks that New York has any of these things. It's very like associated with Southern culture. And that's because things like the Southern Baptist Convention were responsible for funding True Love Waits and like the purity movement that was financially like marketed in the United States and beyond. But like I, as a debutante, was forced to go to like respectability training, which is crazy because it's primarily like Black people in my church, right? It's like primarily immigrants, in fact, Caribbean immigrants in my church. And my grandmother was part of the like founding debutante committee. And so much of it is like assimilation into a like homogenous white American culture. But of course, like white supremacy is everywhere. And I'm sure that there are people in other locations who experience similar pressures, right? But coming into polyamory, it was being able to say like, I don't want to have sex right now. or maybe even for this phase in my life, or at very least tonight. Like, it really empowered me to go in that direction with my desires, because some of the first things that is important in sharing in like group play, for example, is like our boundaries, our interests, our desires, right? So coming into a space where people were like listening to what my boundaries and interests and desires were, that was already just like revolutionary. I know at my first play party, they had us practice saying no to each other, just like going around the room, asking for a hug, but everyone had to say no. And somatically, that was an incredible practice. It really like it transformed so much of my life. And one of the last things that I want to leave with is that I thought I was like healed, right? But purity culture is so omnipresent that it's hard, I guess, for there ever to be like an endpoint, right? But I went to my first like sex trip. I went to hedonism in Jamaica, which a lot of people who are non-monogamous are probably familiar. And I was having the time of my life. I had a great time. But as soon as I left, the anxiety reached like a high, and then I was panicking, full panic. And what I learned from that experience and with researching purity culture in that way is that from our like honest perspective, like our programming is really integral to like how we navigate the world. And it's really difficult for us to like step away from that programming. It's more about like, you know, being in a safe space to explore and like reaffirming over and over until maybe your nervous system gets it, that you are safe and that you have security in what you're exploring. And so no matter how much I have tried, there's always a moment where I'm like, oh no, the shame is coming back. The like pressure to perform in a way that like ascends on the relationship escalator is back. And, you know, I can swat that away. It's like a forever goal, I guess. Thank you so much. I'm really, like, I know everyone said this, but I'm so honored to be here. I'm so glad that everyone is talking and engaging in the chat. And thank you so much.